Today's lesson, we're going to look at continuing with our combinations, our permutations. So our old formula that we did for a permutation was NPR is n factorial over n minus r. So you can see it's almost the same. The only thing that's extra is that extra r factorial. So whatever that other number is, we get one extra thing to divide by. So when we're dealing with these questions, really the only difference is a permutation occurs when order matters. So that's for things like we're lining people up in a row, or you want to arrange letters in a row to make a word, or making like a pin number or something like that. A combination now, when we use the C notation, is where order doesn't matter. So that'll be things for you want to make a committee of people, or you're grouping cards together, or you're grouping objects together where it doesn't really matter which one goes in which order. Other than that, the rest of it's pretty much the same. So on your calculator, you can type in 10C6 just the way it is, and it'll give you the answer. But let's actually expand this out using the formula. So that'd be 10 factorial on top. Then we'd have 10 minus 6, which is 4 factorial, and then also the 6 factorial. So basically all we're doing is we're dividing the bottom by the number of arrangements you could take those people. So 10p6 would mean we're taking 6 people and putting them in order out of 10. So then we're going to take that answer and divide it by 6 factorial because we don't care what order those 6 people actually go in. So that's how it works in terms of the formula. And like I said, you can just type it in on your calculator, choose the NCR instead of NPR, and it'll give you the final answer, which in this case would be the same thing as 10 times 9 times 8 times 7. The 6 down would cancel. Then we also have 4, 3, 2, 1. So we can see we'd have 10 times 9 is 90. Divided by 3 would be 30. Times 7 should be 210, should be our answer if I did that right in my head. So that's the solution. And what you're going to see is quite often with the C notation, you're going to get more answers, like lower answers than what you did with the P. So let's do another one. This should be a C. I did a typo. So we want to know what n is going to be for NC2 equal to 15. So once again, we could guess and check, and that works fine, but let's actually solve it using the formula. So we'd have n factorial over n minus 2 times 2 equal to 15. So we can simplify n factorial over n minus 2. We'd have n and n minus 1, and then n minus 2 down would cancel. Dividing by 2 equals 15, so we'll actually bring that 2 up, so we'd have 30. So now we could FOIL this out, so we'd have n squared minus n minus 30 equals 0. So our factors would be 6 and 5, minus 6 and 5. So that means our solutions would be 6 and negative 5. The negative doesn't make sense, so 6 should be the right solution. So 6C2, if you do that on your calculator, you should get 15 for a solution. So let's do a couple examples. Next one here, it says we got 8 females, 9 males. We want to have 6 spots. We want to pick any 6 out of the total people. So we'd have 17C6, and just type that in and you got your answer. Next one, we've got 3 and 3. So we want 3 out of the 8 females, and we want 3 out of the 9 males. So do both of them, multiply your 2 answers together. So remember, and, anytime you see and, we see times. The next one, we got David, so you could write it as 1C1, right? There's one David, we have to take him. We want one other male, so that means there's only going to be 8 males left to choose from. We want one other one, and then we want 4 out of the 8 females. So UT, you're going to get 1C1, 8C1, things like that. 1C1 actually ends up being just 1, so it doesn't change. 8C1 would actually just be 8, so that you could also write this as 8 times 1 times 8C4 would also work. Okay, here's another one. Let's go through. So we got 4. So we had 2 doctors, 3 surgeons, 3 firefighters, and 4 nurses. There's a typo here again. So we have 4 nurses, and we're asking how many ways could we pick 4 people. I got 4, and then I got 6. There's a typo there too. Okay, anyway, so we want to choose 4 people out of this group. So it's asking how many ways could we get 1 out of each. So we got 1 out of the 2 doctors, so 2C1. We got 1 out of the 3 surgeons, 1 out of the 3 firefighters, and 1 out of the 4 nurses. So you could do it in C notation, it would work fine. This one we could actually also do it just in regular 2 times 3 times 3 times 4 would also work as well, but let's stick with the C notation. Now the next one is saying how many ways could you get if you have at least 3 nurses? So that means if we have 3 nurses, we have 3 out of the 4 nurses, and then that means we'd have 1 other. We want 4 people still, so that means if we take out the nurses, we still have 8 people left over. So that means we'd have 1 more of the remaining 8. So that's for 3 nurses, but in this kind of context, you gotta be careful. So at least 3 means we want 3 nurses or we want 4 nurses. So that'd be all 4, and then we'd have 0 of the remaining 8. Okay, so these would simplify a little bit. So 4C3 is going to equal to just 4, and we'll talk about that in a second. 8C1 would just be 8. And the last one here, 4C4, ends up being 1, and 8C0 is also 1. So this one actually we can simplify pretty easily. 4 times 8 is 32, 1 times 1 is 1, so we actually get 32, and the OR, we have to do plus because we're going to get one or the other, so we'd have 32 choices in one scenario, or we have 1 in the other, so that would give us 33 for a final answer. Just like the first one, we could have multiplied. 2 times 3 is 6, times 3 is 18, times 4 is 72, I think, if I did that right in my head. Okay, so anyway, let's keep going with C. Now it's saying how many ways to get at most 2 nurses. So in this case, if we have 2 nurses again, that would be 4C2, and then we'd have 2 out of the 8 others. Or, since it's at most, we got to go down, we could have 1 nurse, so 4C1 and 3 others. Or we could have 0 nurses and 4 others. So if we add all these up, that should give us an answer, just by looking at it, I'm guessing it's going to be 49. So, and the only reason I know that is if our first 2 answers are correct. So this 72 was our total. So that was total of no restrictions. At least 3 nurses meant that we had 3 or 4. Now at most 2 means we have 0, 1, or 2. So it's basically just the opposite. So we could kind of think of it as being the total minus 33. And that would give us this answer as well. So you could either do it one of 2 ways. Either just figure out all 3, add them up, or do the total minus, and that would work as well. Let's just kind of, I'll look at it here before we do this question. So we've seen a few questions now where we've had things like 4C1, and then we've had 4C3, and the reason I've said these things are equal, we've actually said they're both equal to 4. And so we're going to see that with the C notation we get these duplicates like this because, let's kind of look at it, if I gave you 4C1, that's going to be 4 factorial over 3 factorial and 1 factorial. If I gave it to you as 4C3, it would be 4 over 1 and 3. And those are the same thing. So quite often when you get these kind of questions, you're going to see that if the 2 numbers, the R numbers add up to the same total of the 4, they're going to be the exact same answer, only for C notation. P notation does not work like that. Okay, so there are a couple of key ones. Let me just clear all this. So there are a couple of key ones. So you want to remember that if you had something like 4C4, that's going to actually equal to just 1, because in this case we're picking all 4 out of 4, and you could use the formula and it'll show you that it's 1, but it's a good one to remember. If you had something like 4C1, that'll equal 4, because we're just choosing 1 out of 4 people, or remember that'd be the same thing as 4C3, and also if we have anything C0, that's equal to, not 0, it's equal to 1 as well, because not choosing a group would also be a possible selection. So those are a couple of key ones that we see quite often. Okay, let's do these next few examples. So we got NC7 on top and N minus 1, that should be a minus in the middle, N minus 1 C5 on the bottom, and it's asking, simplify this. So NC7 would be N factorial over N minus 7 and 7. Fix that a little bit. And then on the bottom, we've got n minus 1 factorial over n minus 1 minus 5 would be n minus 6 and 5. So we can actually simplify these a little bit. The n minus 1 on the top, or sorry, the n and the n minus 1, we can actually cancel those out. And the only difference is we'd have just an n left over. And then on the bottom, we've got an n minus 7 and an n minus 6. Same thing, we'd have n minus 7, the next one would be n, we'd have n minus 6 on the bottom, the very bottom one. We can think of these, it might be easier to think of these as being multiplied by their reciprocal. Let's do it that way. Okay, so we've canceled our n and n minus 1. That gives us an n left over on top. Now we have n minus 6 and n minus 7. That'll be an n minus 6 left over on top as well. And then we have a 5 factorial and a 7 on the bottom. So the 7 would cancel. We'd have a 7 and a 6. And that would be it. So we could simplify this a little bit. We'd have n times n minus 6 over 42. Okay, the next one, next example, we could guess and check again, but let's actually solve this one again, sort of like we just did to get a little extra practice. We'd have 3 times n factorial over n minus 3 factorial and 3. And on the other side, we'd have n plus 1 factorial over n minus 3. 1 minus 4 would give you minus 3. And 4 factorial. So once again, we can cancel. In this case, you can see we've got an n minus 3 on both sides, so those will cancel. We've got a 3 and a 4 that'll cancel with just a 4 left over. And we have an n and n plus 1, so those will cancel, and we just have an n plus 1 left over. So if we cross multiply these, we have 3 times 4, which is 12. And we just have our n plus 1. Bring the 1 over, we just get 11. So that means if we go back to the original, if we put in 11 in for our n's, so 12c4 is the same thing as 3 times 11c3. And you can check that on your calculator and it will indeed work. Okay, our last example here is, this is the common question that shows up where the C notation comes in handy. So if we have 20 people and they're going to shake hands with everybody else in the room once, that means we're basically going to take 20 people and we're going to combine them into groups of 2. So 2 people shake hands, we don't care what order they go in. So we want to shake 2 out of 20, we want to take groups of 2 out of the total 20. And that will work. This notation also works well if you get a question where it's talking about how many games get played. So let's suppose we have 10 teams, and in a tournament they're going to play every team twice. So that means we could do, actually let's do it 3 times just so we don't get the same number. So we have 10 teams that we're going to group, but in a normal game you're going to play, 2 teams play a game, hockey, football, basketball, whatever. So we'd have 2 out of 10. So that'll tell you how many games are played for everybody to play each other once. So in this case, then we just times it by 3 if they play everybody 3 times. So those are common questions that do show up, so it's good to have them understood. And that's all.